All right, welcome to the Health with Hashimoto's podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to my guest today. This is Lola MacLean. She is a functional gut health consultant and family nurse practitioner who helps high achieving women overcome bloating, constipation, and fatigue through a root cause functional medicine approach. She founded the Halen Empowered Clinic to make gut healing simple, sustainable, and truly effective so that women can finally feel good in their bodies again. Welcome, Lola. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to dive into all the things that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So I'm most excited to talk about like burnout and hormones and then
Mhm.
how those impact digestion. And I know you work with a lot of high achieving women. I feel like a lot of women with Hashimoto's kind of fall into that category. So
Yeah.
what patterns do you see with high achieving women? Like what patterns contribute to their digestive issues?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, when we talk about burnout, like if you do a Google search or if you're on social media and you're Googling burnout, kind of the first thing that you're going to see is cortisol, right? Cortisol has been labeled the stress hormone, it's the bad guy, and all of those things. But it is actually a super important hormone and is extremely critical, especially when you're thinking about thyroid, right? Because we never want it to be zero, right? We need cortisol, but we also don't want it to be super high because then it can kind of drive our body into this state of more like holding on to things. So that like weight retention, it can shift some of the patterns that we see with the thyroid hormones. It can shift a lot as far as our insulin signaling pathways and our blood sugar regulation and those kinds of things. Then with the women that I generally work with, because I do see a lot of individuals that have a thyroid kind of complex or profile. And it's interesting too, because there's also a lot of women who I work with who we identify that they have a thyroid issue. Like they've been told everything's normal, it's fine, like not a big deal, right? And then come to find out, like as we do a little bit of a deeper dive, like, no, you have like hypothyroidism and you do have elevated antibodies and it is a big deal, right? Like this might be the piece that's why you're kind of spinning your wheels with stuff. So with the cortisol piece specifically, right? Like a lot of times especially the high achieving women, we're doing the right things. We're checking off the boxes. We're listening to everybody. We're eating clean. We're exercising. We're taking our supplements or our medications or all the things. But then because of that, our adrenal glands will release this cortisol due to this perceived stress, right? And then with that perceived stress, whether it's emotional or even physical, so things like skipping meals or hitting the gym way too much, or that kind of stuff can be a stressor, right? We end up having that chronic elevation. And so that can slow that conversion of T3 to T4, right? So T3 is that active thyroid form, and T4 is that inactive thyroid form. So if we have a slower conversion of inactive to active, then we definitely start to see some of that hypothyroid pattern, right? And that can show up a lot in our digestion. It can show up as slower motility, so we become more constipated. It shows up as lower stomach acid because we need good thyroid hormone to produce enough stomach acid. So we actually start having nutrient depletion. So even all the things that make our thyroid hormone, like selenium and zinc and iron and all of those things, we start to lose enough of that. So it kind of becomes this forward feeding cycle.
Man, yes
Yeah.
to all of that.
Like, don't let me go on too far. I can talk forever about this, so interrupt me whenever
No,
you're ready.
is all so true. And
Yeah.
I especially love the part where you, not love, relate to the part where you said the women who have been told everything is normal. And you're like, no,
Mhm.
actually, after digging into this, you do
Mhm.
have a thyroid issue. I hear that
Yeah.
from so many women. So
Mhm.
I guess deviating from my pre-scripted questions,
Yeah.
how do you find that in someone when they come to you and they're
Mhm.
like, all of my labs are quote normal, my doctor can't find anything, but I feel horrible.
Mhm. Yeah, so women generally are coming to me because of their digestive issues, right? And so I'll start with them by going through all the labs that they've had done with their previous providers and those kinds of things. And, there sometimes there will be clues that like, oh, you're obviously not digesting this well, or something's showing up as far as like lower stomach acid, or they'll come with thyroid panels that is just a TSH, which is always my favorite. Even when I was in primary care, I was like, why do we not do this?
Right?
Yeah, and then trying to convince other practitioners, like, no, you need to run like all these things, was sometimes it was yelling at a brick wall. But so we'll go through those. And then because of the digestive issues, more often than not, what I'm doing is running a comprehensive stool test. And then that will elucidate a number of patterns for us, because we'll see specific bacterial profiles that kind of push towards like, oh, there's an autoimmune reaction happening. And look, these different things are showing up that could be contributing to more of this kind of like thyroid pattern that I'll see. And so we start talking about that, and that kind of gives them this like inspiration to be like, oh no, I need to ask for a more in-depth panel. Or sometimes I'll just order it depending like on where they are and those kinds of things, and just be like, okay, we're doing a thyroid panel because this is the thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What is your favorite stool test to run?
So the one that I run is a GI map.
Okay.
And so yeah, that one is, I find, the best as far as like giving you a good overview, because it does a lot of just intestinal health markers, and then also gives you a good understanding of like what is going on with good bacteria, bad bacteria, kind of these inflammation patterns that will happen. If there are things like worms or protozoa or parasites, those will sometimes show up for people. But that's like I think, a very good standard one for people.
Is there one thing that you always see on that GI map? Like, somebody's listening and they're like, okay, I
Yeah.
don't have the money for it, but Lola said that 100% of people have this one thing. Is there one thing that people could
Mhm.
start working on right now?
So, at least from what I see with women, I think it's just because of the population I work with. I would say 99% of the time I see a pattern as far as like lower stomach acid, right? And that, because most of the women I work with are also under 65, I'm not going to, age is not a factor in it, right? Because we do naturally have lower stomach acid production as we age. But that being said, it is generally related to stress and hypothyroidism. And so stress is the big one. So anything you can do to really work on like being present with your meal and slowing yourself down before you start eating will help to raise that stomach acid, and will help to like really start the digestive process, which is amazing for people.
That is so interesting. I
Yeah.
always tell people that, your digestive process starts with your five senses.
Yeah,
It starts
absolutely.
as you're thinking about
Mhm.
eating and smelling and looking and all of those things.
Yeah, that cephalic stage, right? It starts in the brain. They even have a thing for it, the cephalic stage of digestion. So, yeah, exactly. You're smelling it, you're looking at it, the beauty of it, the remembered experience of whatever the meal was before. Like, oh, when I was with my family, or my mom always made this. And, all of that contributes to it. Yeah.
I had no idea that it increases your stomach acid.
Yeah. So actually, like, because if you go back to that whole like stressed out space, right? If we're in this like fight flight state, which a lot of us are when we're just running around, we're doing so many things, we're multitasking, we're not present with whatever it is we're trying to do, then our sympathetic nervous system kind of takes over. And when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, we're really not supposed to be digesting. Like, that's not how our body was designed. So, our digestive enzymes kind of start to weaken. Our motility itself stops. And so, you're not going to digest. And so, if you're eating while you're rushing or like focused on work or whatever, your body's just doing what it was designed to do, not digest. And so, it sits there and you're just like, oh, I feel uncomfortable.
Right. Right. I
Yeah.
had I had one shift in the ER and I was out at triage. You know, I was
Hmm.
responsible for everybody in the waiting room. It was a crazy, crazy busy day. And
Hmm.
I remember feeling so hungry. I didn't have any time for a break. But I ran to the bathroom and on my way back I grabbed, a protein shake. It was another, I want to say 6 or 8 hours before I got out of my shift. And on my drive home, I was still feeling gross. And I had to
Mhm.
pull over to the side of the road and I threw up. This is like
Oh
6
gosh.
to 8 hours after I had that protein shake.
Yeah.
I threw up the entire thing. I hadn't
Oh.
digested one drop of it.
Mhm.
And so that's what I think of when I think of like stress impacting that motility.
Mhm.
Obviously, most days for most people are not going to be that stressful. So
Yeah.
what would you commonly see?
Yeah, so generally speaking, even though, like, yes, it's not that stressful for most people, I think a lot of us put this perceived stress into us. And while we're not like, we don't generally have those times where, oh, we don't get a break or whatever. You're sitting down and you're eating while you're going through your emails, right? Or you're eating in the car on the way to pick somebody up and rushing through, and like now you're in traffic and worried about stuff. So that same situation kind of happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It, and we always just feel so busy. At least
we
for
do.
me. Like
Yeah. Mhm.
I feel like if I'm just sitting, I'm not doing anything. And
It's
really
hard. I
that's what
think
your body's asking for.
yeah, absolutely, and I think, for so many of us, that has kind of become a badge of honor, right, is that busyness, like, if you're just like, "Oh, I'm not really doing anything today," then, "Oh, how nice," right?
Right?
"What's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing anything today?" But we really do need rest. We really do need that time to have restoration so our body can literally do the work of healing, to take out the junk, to repair all the stuff that needs to be repaired, to process, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody is listening to this and like, okay, yes, I deal with stress and
Mm,
I know my gut health could be better. So she's already thinking she's going to be present at her meals, use her five senses.
mhm.
What else can she do that's simple to improve her gut health?
Yeah, I think one of the other big things that people knock is going for a really short walk after meals, right? And the key with that one is not speed walking, not rushing through it, like a real nice little amble around the block. And that can make a world of difference for people because that starts the motility process and gets things going. It also helps with some blood sugar regulation. It gets you outside. Sometimes this time of year it's a little bit hard, but if you're, in the right space and have the appropriate attire, just a short walk around the block is not a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I'm timing that, are you saying like I finish eating and I go outside or like wait 10 to 15 minutes? Does it matter about the time frame?
Yeah, so generally speaking, it's within that first 10-minute period that you go for like a 5 to 10 minute walk, right?
Okay.
Because if you're like sitting, so you've sat down, because this is that key with the digestion piece, right? You've like sat down, you've been present with your meal, you've chewed thoroughly, you've actually taken your time, right? So now things should be moving from your stomach and into your small intestines. And so at that point, like that walk is very helpful for getting things to continue to move and to digest, right? So that's you got to do that first part before the walk around the block is helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember actually, my husband did a gross experiment with my kids. We had donut holes and I
Yeah.
had them like chew their natural amount of chewing and then spit it out and look at the big chunks. And then they chewed
Oh,
like
gross.
5 times and spit it out 10 times. It was back when my kids just inhaled their foods.
Food.
And
Uh-huh.
I wanted them to see like you are swallowing huge chunks. It was so gross. I could not do the experiment. I had to leave the room. But my husband got into it and he
Yeah.
showed them, this is the importance of chewing your food
Mhm.
well.
Mhm. I think the other key with that too, like, especially like the donut piece, like it makes things sweeter, right? Because the longer things sit in our mouth, you have that surface area becomes a lot larger. And then the amylase that's in there that's breaking down all the carbohydrates actually makes things sweet. So you sit and you chew and you're like, wow, this green bean is sweet. This sweet potato is sweet. These things, these natural foods that we have are actually really good when we're not just like scarfing them down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, taking your time to eat, you will
Mhm.
enjoy your food more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think that was one thing that was hard for me when I went gluten-free. I like
Mm,
the food is gross. I don't
mhm,
want to this was initially, before I figured out good meals, but
mhm.
my initial thought was I don't want to taste my food. It's just fuel. It's gross.
Yeah.
So any tips for people who, you're in a meal that you don't like?
Mhm.
What are some digestion tips for that?
Yeah, that's a good question because, like, if it's a meal that you're not enjoying, I guess why, right?
Right.
Like, is it just the actual food and those kinds of things and the way that it tastes? Because one thing that's always super interesting to talk with people about is the actual amount of time it takes for our taste buds to change, right? Because especially when we're thinking about, thyroid and autoimmunity, or maybe even some of those elevated thyroid antibody markers, gluten-free is a great suggestion. Even if you're not having, like, even if you don't have celiacs, just because of the molecular mimicry that happens, right, with gluten in your thyroid. But so when people take things out of their diet or they switch over to different things, it's not like, oh, a week it'll taste better. It's a good 3 to 6 months sometimes for our taste buds to actually shift, right? And so just
Yeah.
having that knowledge and being like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't taste good today, but I'll try it again, or I'll try it again in a week, or maybe a couple weeks, or if it's important, that consistency piece. But otherwise too, like, I'm a big fan of, like, being creative with meals, and if you don't like the way it tastes, like, let's talk about that, let's switch it up, let's find something else, like, you don't
Right.
have to eat just because you have to eat, right? It should be an experience.
That is ideal. That's something I struggle with one of my kids.
Yeah, yeah,
I was like, "Yes, you do just have to eat."
yeah, just try it, just try it.
But yes, but we are working on, yeah, what is good. So,
Yeah,
for women with Hashimoto's that you see,
mhm,
what are like, you mentioned the gluten-free. Are there
mhm.
other types of diets or foods that you recommend to stay away from or diets to shift to?
Yeah, so generally speaking, because that's kind of the nuance with it too. A lot of times when women are coming to me primarily because of their digestive issues, but there's also that history of like hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's. Almost always, there's also a history of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? So that's a big, like, 2 that I always see together is, "Oh, I've got thyroid and I've got SIBO." And then that whole piece goes into like, okay, well, have you tried the low FODMAP, or have we taken out some foods that are fermentable? Are you eating fiber? Those kinds of things. So the diet recommendations are very nuanced to the person, right? That's a big thing of mine because I'm not like, I see that all the time. It's like, oh, you should only eat low carb, or you should do keto, or you should do gluten free, or dairy free, or sugar free, or all these things. And it's maybe is the answer, right? Depending on what you can afford, what you're able to sustain, what feels good to you, and what isn't more stressful, right? Because a lot of the stress that we put on trying to be perfect with the diet actually just compounds a lot of the digestive issues we're already having.
Absolutely. So
So, and
how does
yeah.
a woman figure out what's right for her?
Yeah, a lot of it is trial and error, right? I know that's not good to hear. We want like a real like good answer, but you can do things like food sensitivity tests and that kind of stuff, which I'm not a big fan of because there's not a perfect one, and also there's a lot of nuance in how you read them, and a lot of times we come up positive to the foods that we eat a lot because we actually have that enhanced intestinal permeability or leaky gut component that goes on. So a lot of false positives. Ideally, kind of gold standard is an elimination diet to see kind of what you're sensitive to or things like that. But otherwise, it really is like well, how does this make you feel after a couple of weeks? Do you feel more energized? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel better or not? And if not, okay, let's shift it. Because there's also like, how are you able to process fats, right? And utilize fats for energy? How are you utilizing carbohydrates for energy? Where are you in your lifespan? Are you in perimenopause, postmenopause, like having normal cycles, or do you have PCOS, or all of these things, right? Because they all interplay together.
And then if she's listening, she's like,
Mhm.
"Okay, I'm with you on all that," but she's got a family to feed.
Yeah.
Yet, I guess any tips?
Yeah. So my favorite thing to do is kind of like I have a base of what our meal is, right? Like I know what I want to eat. This is what I'm making. And then like whatever my husband wants to add on, he can add on. So like usually he likes white rice and stuff like that. So I'll have a white rice for him. Or I found out the other day he doesn't like tofu. We've been married for 20 years and I finally find out he doesn't like tofu. I'm like, what? Ah. Okay, I'll pick out the tofu for you. Great. Or then like our kiddo, she really likes to have things because she's 5. She likes separate things. Things mixed together are not an okay thing for her. She's pretty picky. So before I start cooking, I'm like, okay, well, we'll separate things out for her, but here's our base. And then we just kind of mix and match. So
Yeah, I like that idea of having the
yeah.
base. That
Yeah.
is.
It
That
makes it
is good.
really easy. And especially like with husband, it can be like, okay, you're an adult, you know what you want to add or not add, but and then all the explanations about like why we're eating this vegetable and why this is good for us and how it nourishes us goes a long way too with kiddos. And especially like what I found is if she's in kind of the preparation with me, she enjoys the meal more too. So like the chopping up vegetables or stirring, then she's like, "Oh, I want to eat that." I'm like, "Good."
Yes.
Yeah.
Win.
Yeah, but no, I'm not a fan of separate meals. That is not a short order cook is not what you should be doing.
It's just not sustainable, and it
No, it
makes
is
you
not.
dread meals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it really does.
So what does lasting gut healing actually look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I'm thinking about actually like long-term lasting gut health, that is that you are able to eat without bloating, you're not having that chronic constipation or running to the bathroom all the time after meals. It's also that you're able to actually absorb what you're putting into your body, because that's a big thing that we miss out on, right? It's not just what you eat, but it's what you can eat, what you can absorb, what you can get past the cell membrane, what you can actually utilize, right? So a lot more goes into that. And it's also just like feeling good in the choices that you make and how you're nourishing yourself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So if there's one thing, well, before we go into that, yes,
Hmm.
can you tell us about your freebie? You have a free guide for
Yeah.
listeners, right?
Yeah, so I have a bloating guide that I love to share with people because that seems to be the common thing that women are like, I'm bloated, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like it's okay to talk about the bloating. It's not okay to talk about the constipation or the diarrhea, but we can all relate to bloating. And so within that, I go through like the 5 most common reasons why we tend to be bloated, and then also some kind of like background about, well, how do you know if this is you? And then also what are some like quick tips that you could utilize to help to reduce that, right? So is it stress? Is it the stomach acid piece? Is it, the dysbiosis, so that imbalance in bacteria kind of a thing?
Right.
Yeah,
Awesome. I will have the link for that down in the show notes so everybody can go right down there and get that. Because yes, bloating is a huge thing.
it is. It really is.
Yes. Yep. So what is one thing that you want people to take away from our conversation today? If they can only remember one thing, what is that?
Hmm. I think that eating hygiene piece, right? And that, so that when I say eating hygiene, I do mean that like slowing down and being present with your meal. I think so many of us, it's so easy to say, and it is so hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so hard to do, but it can make a world of difference for people. And especially when we think about, that Hashimoto piece and possibly lower stomach acid, and definitely with thyroid, oftentimes there's that constipation present. Like actually having that ability to help raise your stomach acid, to be present with your meals, and to really focus on the digestion piece can really make a world of difference for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Let me close out with the disclaimer. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Please discuss any questions or concerns with your healthcare professional. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration.